Welcome back to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Bryce. Today, we're going to get cooking with an enormously popular wild game chef, Jean-Paul Bourgeois, who's racked up more than 100,000 Instagram followers and is perhaps best known for his widely followed video series, Duck Camp Dinners. Born and raised just south of New Orleans, Chef Jean-Paul's cooking is a mix of down-home, Southern-style traditions and modern techniques perfected in New York City restaurants. However, knowledgeable as he is, Chef Jean-Paul is adept at discussing and demonstrating techniques that average or even beginning waterfowl cooks can use to take their waterfowl feast to the next level. I sat down with Jean-Paul in July at Delta's Duck Hunters Expo when he had a break from entertaining crowds at Delta's field-to-table stage. So, get those notepads ready. Here comes some fascinating insights from the chef on cooking your tastiest ducks and geese yet. Chef Jean-Paul, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, actually on the Friday of the Delta Waterfowl Expo, because that's before I lose all my voice and my brain's still fresh and crisp on a Friday. Saturday gets you start to go down that slippery slope here.
Yeah, I hear you. It is one of those things where, I kind of liken this to going to a bar, where you go to a bar with a lot of music and you start just to talk with your friends. You have to almost yell. Yeah. And then by the end of the night, you're like, holy cow, I can barely talk. Yeah. And this is the expo. It's a big, wild, crazy place. Not crazy necessarily, but we're down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana this particular year. And for the listener in Oklahoma, we're going to be in Oklahoma City next year. But so put that on your calendar, Jean-Paul. But we're recording the podcast in a room with a glass wall, basically looking over the expo show floor. So it's actually kind of nice. We don't have the sound issues of people blowing duck and goose calls.
It is, and you also get to see the expo from a different level. Literally and figuratively. Mm-hmm. We say that a lot in the restaurant world, in the cooking world. Chefs, we become so in our box in the kitchen and creating and going out into the dining room to restaurant goers and to guests. But rarely do we go into our own restaurant and sit at a table and be served and see the food from that side. And then kind of in the same way, we're so used to being out on the floor and just seeing the people around us. But from this way, you got this bird's eye view. You can actually see the expansiveness of this show and how many people really come to it. And just everybody's booth in this just congregation of waterfowl enthusiasts is pretty awesome.
Yeah, this is we've had 3 of them, and you've been at all of them now.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So teach me how to pronounce your last name.
Bourgeois.
Bourgeois?
Bourgeois. So, boo, I'm a ghost. Boo! And joie. If you read it, you'd be like Borgias. Right?
I could see that, yeah.
But it's French, and this is what you get in South Louisiana. Here we are. Jean-Paul Bourgeois. That was my dad's Lloyd Thomas Bourgeois. My grandpa was Jean-Lucien Bourgeois. And so, his first language was Cajun French, and he learned English later in life. And then, so on. My dad spoke English because at that time, when my dad was in school, it was still considered lower class, ignorant, kind of uneducated to speak French.
Okay.
And for a long time, it was outlawed to even teach French in schools because there was this, what's the word? There was this mark on the French culture that it was not, modern enough for the society. And now what you see now, and especially parts in West Louisiana, that they're starting to teach it again. They're starting to teach Cajun French specifically, which is a little bit different dialect than classic French. But that's a whole other conversation for
I like
for Louisiana history.
We just do whatever we want here, which is what I love. So people know you as Chef Jean-Paul through Duck Camp Dinners, making quite a name for yourself out there in the world.
Yeah,
I think.
Look, the goal of this whole show is just to create authentic, original content that was really shined a true light on what I believe to make duck hunting so special. And that is the duck camp. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Louisiana, Arkansas, Alaska, wherever. There's just what I love about duck hunting is that it's communal. You rarely ever hunt by yourself. And the place where you're congregating, whether it's a camp or a cabin or, somebody's shed, I just love the communal factor of duck hunting. I love hunting ducks, and I love being in a good population of ducks, right? And being in hunting them. But really, it really, like, I made the show to memorialize this duck camp that we go to. And I want to always remember it, no matter if a hurricane wiped it off the map, because that's a real thing every year that we have to deal with. Is big hurricane comes through, there's a good possibility it's going to be in the swamp somewhere. We'll never find it. Or, like, God forbid, anything else happens. Like, I just always want them to remember this place. And that's why we created the first season. And I think from that pure, like, just wanting to create this video piece that ended up being 6 episodes, it came from a place of, like, genuine, like, heart.
Yeah.
It was all because we did it on a shoestring budget. We had a couple key people that helped, like, throw it all together. The production company did it for, like, literally nothing, paid themselves nothing, just enough for their time and their travel and so on. And we made it, and I think it was conceptualized and birthed from this idea of, like, we love this place so much. Let's memorialize it. Let's create this show, even if it's only 1 season, so we always have it. We can always go back to it. And you hear me reference that a little bit into the show, and we're sitting in the duck blind and we're telling stories or whatever. And it's like, one day we're gonna better sit with our own children, and be like, and say, remember that time we made that show, and, like, our kids are gonna make fun of us because of all the dumb things we do on television or whatever. So it really. And it's kind of grew from there, and it's evolved, but we still try to keep that spirit of, like, no matter where we go, no matter what camp is, they have their own story, different but the same as the one that we have at our little floating camp. And let's just make sure we tell that one, because those people love that camp.
Love it.
And so those people love that camp. Let's make sure we tell their story in this place, from this, like, lovingness of this place and wanting to memorialize that. So every episode comes with, usually a different camp, different group of characters, different recipes, because there's different food that comes out of that too.
Different tradition.
Yeah.
Right.
Local tradition. And look, like, the kind of the joke around Louisiana is that everybody has their own gumbo recipe. And that's true. You can go, if you're in this room and you got 50 Louisianians, you can get 50 different gumbo recipes from them. And that's the same with their camps. That's the same whether it's a deer camp or duck camp or, whatever. And I would say that, and I've received enough feedback throughout the course of these last 5 years from folks all around the country that have pheasant camp every year, or salmon camp every year, or mule deer camp, that say, we got a place just like that. It doesn't float. We don't hunt ducks. And I don't know nothing about Cajun food, but I swear that's the same place.
So your show captures that tradition of duck camp.
I think so. And I think that's why that resonates. The show resonates with outdoorsmen because I think this because I've been told this, that they see themselves and they see their own friends with our own friends. And even though they've never been to Louisiana, don't even know how to make a gumbo, or not even hunting ducks, they still share the same commonality of, like, we got this group of people that love being in the outdoors, pursuing whatever that pursuit is, and that find friendships in that. And
we go hide from the world at our camp.
Yeah, when I say camp, my wife, who's from Midland, Texas, she often thinks, like, a tent and, like, a campsite, and I'm like, that's not. Right. I mean, I hear you. I see what you're going at. I understand why but that we're talking about, a camp that is, a second. It's our home in the outdoors.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean, like, I'm lighting a fire and pitching a tent and sleeping on the ground.
True.
But although, like, I mean, we run a generator. We have no refrigerator. Like, we keep thinking, like, it's somewhat of a campsite, right?
That's cool.
A floating campsite.
That is cool. That is super cool. Hey, let's unbox you. Everybody has a past. Let's learn yours. So you are Born and raised in South Louisiana, is that right?
Born and raised in South Louisiana. I was born in Labadeville, Louisiana. I moved to Thibodaux when I was a teenager. I went to culinary school at Nicholls State University, at John Falls Culinary Institute, one of the best culinary institutes in the nation. And then in 2006, I graduated. I moved to. At this point, I had spent some time in France, and I had spent some time in different parts of the country, and I was starting to get this urge to be like, I love Louisiana, but I know there's more out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved to California, spent some time there. I moved to St. Thomas. I spent some time there, and I moved to New York in 2009, and that's when my career really started to blossom and flourish as a chef.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in some nice restaurants. Sometimes I'll say, like, I've worked from beach bars to Michelin stars.
Yeah.
For those who are not familiar with what a Michelin star is, it's one of the higher rankings that an organization can give to restaurants. So beach bars to Michelin stars, and I've kind of covered that gambit. And back when COVID happened, I left my traditional cooking job, and I was working in New York for a really great restaurant group called Union Square Hospitality Group, at a restaurant called Blue Smoke, which was a Southern food and barbecue restaurant inspired. And I had left there because I had made duck camp dinners, and I was feeling really called to continue doing things in media and being on camera. I just love the creativeness of it, and I'm just a creative person. So I got a lot of that creativity out when I cook, and I still do.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this other level of creativity that I wanted to kind of explore my own knowledge about food with. So I started videotaping and doing different things like that, and got introduced in the Food Network world, and was on some television doing that, and wrote my own pilot shows and produced my own pilot stuff, and started pitching to networks, which some of them have never seen the light of day, and we're still trying to get those off. And then Duck Camp Dinners came about, and we filmed Duck Camp Dinners. If you notice, season 1, there's a lot of mask wearing. We had to cover our face even in Louisiana. But that happened, maybe 8 months. We filmed that maybe 8 months after COVID really happened. And I moved out of New York shortly after that, for a number of different reasons, even though I love the city. But I've always, even when I lived in New York for those 10 years, over a decade, I lived in New York, I didn't get to hunt as much as I did. I mean, I just didn't get to go home, and I didn't hunt. I didn't have any shotguns there. So anyway, that's my career flourished because I was working for a great restaurant group. I was one of the youngest executive chefs in the group, and I managed 3 street side locations, so 3 traditional restaurants. There was, then we had 2 kind of concepts, one at the Nationals Park in DC, one at Citi Field where the Mets play, then also at JFK Airport. And so at 29 years old, I was managing 3 concepts, 2 restaurants, a bar, an airport, and 2 baseball fields.
Jeez.
So I kind of hit the ground running when it came to being on the executive level of being a chef. And although that was fun, I did miss the days of walking into a kitchen and be like, okay, my prep list is 20 things long. I need to check those off. I need to do my service. I need to clean up, and I need to rinse and repeat. There's a certain flow about that. And then when you become an executive chef and kind of in those levels, you start to uncover the business a lot more. And the business is fun, and some people really thrive being in that business side of it. But I just wanted to cook. I just wanted to be creative. And I found that as I became more of an executive and had more of those hats I was wearing, I felt like I was becoming less creative. That probably kind of drew me into doing more media, where I was finding another palette to be creative in. So
that's cool. Were you raised as a hunter?
I was, yeah. My dad grew up hunting small game, rabbit and squirrel mostly, because he grew up pretty poor, and that's what you just had. You can get out into the woods, you can get out to the cane field, run beagles for rabbits, hunt squirrels in the woods, fishing by Lafourche, which he grew up on. And then once he became in his late 30s, he took up duck hunting more. And he was a lawyer. He started getting his feet underneath the ground, and he understood. In Louisiana, mostly, at least in our parts in Louisiana, we have to lease land from school board, from oil and gas, and so on.
Okay.
Not a lot of land ownership in terms of waterfowl, unless you're out in West Louisiana where you may own rice or ag, something like that. But where I'm from in Southeast, very marshy, woody, and it's, you don't farm anything. It's just natural vegetation. What happens, happens. So, he started leasing some property, and he got a mud boat, and back when he was, in his late 30s. And I started hunting with him when I was around 7 or 8. And it started off with just me going to the blind with him and riding in the boat and so on. But I can remember every gun that I've had and how heavy it was. I still remember like those like moments, like that 20 gauge youth model pump that he won at a raffle one day. How when I was 7, like that was just a little too heavy for me. So then I got a 20 gauge crack barrel that I shot my first duck with and stuff like that. So I was raised duck hunting from when I was a young boy, but he wasn't necessarily raised that. And I think like a lot of duck hunters, when they get into it, there's just like something that takes over you. If you haven't, like I was, I kind of felt that calling at a young age, but he didn't. And once he started hunting and he started kind of feeling like what duck hunting was to him and to his friends, I think that really caught hold of him, and he just became obsessed. And he was an obsessive duck hunter until he couldn't like physically hunt anymore. He turns 80 in November. He was just here at the show, but yeah, I don't know. The happiest I ever saw my dad in life was in the duck blind. And so that probably has something to do with it. Like,
yeah.
The happiest I ever saw him was in the duck blind. It's not the happiest I ever am. I can say that with all honesty, but I'm pretty darn happy when I'm in there, those are good memories for me. Those are the best memories that I have of me and my father, is me and him in a duck blind. And it wasn't even necessarily me hunting. It was watching he and his friends have that time together and him actually laugh and make jokes.
Yeah.
He's a pretty rough dude, he's pretty stern, and it's hard to get him to loosen up. But when he was in the duck blind, he was a different man. So
that's good. Yeah, I come from a long line of hunters too, so sounds like for you it would have been maybe a bit unusual to not at least hunt at a young age.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Where did the food start to kick in for you?
I think that's just being from South Louisiana. I think my dad is a great cook.
Okay.
And I don't ever recall a pizza box on our table or, any like there was always just home cooking meals. My mom cooked every day. My dad cooked on the weekends and special occasions. He's still a really great cook. And I think just being in South Louisiana really kind of, I remember the first things I cooked. I remember when my parents remodeled their kitchen and got this brand new Viking stainless steel stove with this copper hood and the exhaust pulling up smoke. I would take the seasonings out of the spice cabinet, and I'd turn on the fire. And they didn't like this, but I was just I was so curious about it. And I was 6, 7 years old, and I would take like pepper, paprika, rosemary, and I just pour it over the fire to just watch what happened when it hit flame and the smells that would come out of it, and if it burn or if it smolder or if it would spark. It would just like catch these little flares, and I would smell, and they would catch me like on a stool over the fire, like pouring different seasoning just on a burner that was coming up hot. And it was just, I saw them cook all my life, and I became obsessed with it. And we always had ducks in the freezer, right? My dad only owned mud boats. Didn't own a boat to go fishing. So what we would do, and this happens a lot in Louisiana to this day, is that you may have a guy that goes just deer hunting, and he shoots a deer, and he may shoot 3 deer, and he has too much deer meat. But what he does is he trades with the duck hunter down the street.
Nice.
Or he trades with the guy who only redfishes or speckled trouts. And so then you start getting this diversified freezer of ducks, then redfish from this guy, hog from this guy, deer from this guy, rabbit, squirrels, you name it. And that's the freezer that I grew up in. That's what we pulled from. So even though my dad didn't do that a lot, he always cooked those different things because it was this barter system in our neighborhood and in our community.
Yeah, I heard that you don't consider yourself a wild game chef, although that's what people know about you.
Yeah.
Rather, you just cook what's around, and because you're a hunter and gatherer, you end up cooking wild game.
Yeah, that's very accurate. That's very accurate. Yeah, like I don't believe that the best red meat that in America is an elk or a caribou or a moose. Like I get that they're really good, and they can be the best when compared to something, but I also think there's a beauty around responsibly and beautifully raised cattle.
Yeah.
Or hogs or chickens. And so, I'm a big believer in the seasons, right? Like when it's duck season, I like to cook fresh duck as much as possible.
Gotcha.
Period. Now, yeah, I'll freeze duck because,
get more than you can eat. Yeah.
I get more than I can eat, and I like to have it for the rest of the season too. But there's, if I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and there's this really great lamb farmer that's raising some of the, some of the best lamb in the country, I'm not gonna be like, I'm a wild game chef and I'm gonna do elk chops instead of these lamb chops. I mean, to me, that's just silly. I mean, I think, and comparatively, I think farm raised duck is just as good as wild duck, but they're different species, right? Like, I mean, I don't treat them as the same. And in fact, in other words, I don't compare them as apples and apples. They're apples and oranges, and it's okay. Like that's okay. Like there's actually a great duck guy in the North Shore of New Orleans, not Covington, but North Shore. When I say the North Shore of New Orleans or North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain, Lake New Orleans is just south of a big old lake called Lake Pontchartrain. It's crescent around the Mississippi River, and we call the North Shore as the north part of Lake Pontchartrain. In that area, there's this place called Backwater Foie Gras, and he raises his own ducks, different mallards and Muscovies and different heritage breeds ducks, and also makes foie gras. Like, I think that's a really cool thing. It's not like I'm like, I only eat wild duck. I mean, it just seems a little short-sighted, because there's a lot of great people out in our country raising animals in a responsible way that's not mass farmed, that's not force fed, that are free range, that are grass fed, and so on and so forth. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's really nothing like a good ribeye.
That is actually, I have these concepts at times. Like, so I was talking earlier with some gentlemen. I said, out in the public, the hunting community says, hunting is conservation. I hunt to, hunting manages wildlife populations. Hunting funds conservation. But if you ask a hunter, why do you hunt? They don't say those things. They say to hunt with my friends, to recreate, to decompress, all those types of things. Those are the real reasons why people hunt. But out in the public, we talk about those other things. Well, I run into a lot of guys, and I catch myself at it sometimes too. I don't buy chicken. I don't buy beef. I only eat what I put in my freezer. I'd say probably 75% of what I eat, I put in the freezer.
Yeah.
And I have pride in that. But I have to admit, I do appreciate, a well-cooked chicken or
yeah. Look, Tyson isn't the only people that grow chickens.
Yeah.
Or raise chickens. Like, there's a lot of really great heritage poultry farms in America if you search hard enough for them. They probably exist in every state. The thing I would say about all that is that, like, I was just on stage cooking, right? And I know there's a lot of hunters in this auditorium. They're like, I love hunting duck, but I don't really love it as a meat. There's just a lot of people and there's a lot, and I think that goes with venison as well. And you get into these, and I think a lot of that is like passed on kind of misrepresentations of what that game is. Like, for example, I got stopped on stage right after, and he said, look, when I freeze ducks and I take them out and thaw, I usually like to soak them in water for like 48 hours before I cook them. And I said, in the old days, when you shot a deer, you'd skin that deer, you'd put them in a cooler, you put ice on them, and you let the water run till they turned gray. Now, this may not happen where you're from, but in Louisiana, it was thought of like you had to like rinse this deer till you basically brine it or used osmosis to flood its cavity with water, let it release all its myoglobin out of its proteins and replace it. And so the meat turned gray. And same with this guy. He's like, he felt like he did that because he saw his parents do that. I was like, what kind of ducks you shooting? Because wood ducks mostly. I was like, bro, you don't need to do that. First of all, I mean, if you don't like the taste of duck and you want to make it more mild, I guess go ahead and do that, because that's a really good way of making duck taste like not duck. But what you're losing is you're losing nutritional value and so on. But really, your problem is cooking it, because if you treat that animal correctly from the kill to the process to the thaw and to once you go into the pan, you're not going to have the problem that you're having, and you don't need to flood it with fresh water, tap water at that, with whatever fluoride and chlorine and minerals from whatever. Like, you're putting all kind of other stuff in there, and that, I think the greatest thing why you eat 75% out of your freezer and why I do the same is that because I've grown to be untrusting of what's in the grocery store now. So now I know exactly what I'm eating. I know exactly how it was harvested and how it was treated and what kind of animal that was and what it was feeding on, whether that's a food plot of whatever. I'm not good with deer, but a food plot of whatever, or shooting corn-fed mallards, and I say corn-fed, you know what I mean, like hunting out of corn, like hunting out of corn, fields, and so I think that's part of the reason why maybe hunting has grown more in popularity, at least I think so, because people are finding a little more distrust with what they can get in the grocery, and they can go in and get their own food, then great. And that's that. But there's also the other side of that, is that there are farmers and people that are raising all kind of different animals in a very responsible way and treating it right and trying to get back to like what it was before commodity farming. And so on. And I think actually those people have a lot more. In fact, they're mostly hunters too. A lot of those folks that are raising great cattle, chickens, and so on are really avid hunters. And those animals that they're raising have a lot more in common than the wild species that we hunting than everything in the grocery store, because those species that they're farming, that they're raising, keep saying farming, but they're raising, are living more of a wild life.
That's true.
Like maybe their cousins are,
Yeah, I agree with you. It is something that we talk a lot about, the future of hunting, and that license purchase trends have been on a long, slow, steady decline. But there's a lot of people out there that are interested in it. And I imagine that a lot of those people are drawn to you. They're thinking of that. They want to know where their meat comes from. And so they're thinking about hunting. So I do think that's something I think we should all open our mind to that and embrace it. Invite someone into hunting that is really interested in the food part of it. I have a story. My mom doesn't listen to this podcast, so I can tell it. But she cooked this duck growing up that was brutal, absolutely brutal. Like, love to go duck hunting, big, huge family activity, but I didn't like eating it. And it was heavy prep, so I don't think she liked cooking it either. But it was overcooked and all those types of things. And so I think once I got older and I learned, that you don't have to cook it, until it's like boot leather, But I do think, I thought where you were going to go earlier is this: people had bad experiences with game, and then so they were turned off to it, and then they passed that on. But I think boy, yes, the taste palette varies, but when you're looking at wild game, I do think there's a great way to cook everything.
Certainly, there's just on stage, and this is one of the first points that I made because it came back all around full circle when I finished it, is that if you don't like the way duck tastes, if you don't think it tastes good, you're likely making, like, duck needs to be cooked in one of two ways. It needs to be cooked to medium rare, medium. And I'm talking like breasts mostly. The legs probably need a little different treatment most of the time. Or, and this is the Cajun way and the Southern cooking way, or you need to go past boot leather until it re-tenderizes and falls off the bone.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So those people in that boot, and it's a big, nobody can see in my hands right now, but there's this little segment of like, there's a little window and gap of medium rare medium where it's like, heck yeah, delicious. Then there's this big old section of boot leather,
which most people probably cook it in.
Yeah. And then there's this little section on the other end of, okay, that boot leather, that protein has broken down enough to where it's allowing moisture back in.
Okay.
And it's starting to pull away from that bone. If we're cooking whole ducks, that breastplate is pulling away from the bone. The legs are falling apart. And then that's the other, because that's where the gumbos come from.
Gotcha.
That's where the jambalayas come from, and all the great Cajun stews come from, is the right side. It's being fallen off the bone. I never grew up eating duck mid-rare medium. That would never even be allowed in my house. It was always falling off the bone.
Oh, got it.
Right? It was like, because that's just not how we ate it. It wasn't until much later in life I was like, wait a second. I can pluck a duck, I can pluck a breast, pluck a whole duck, and take that breast off the bone, keep the fat cap, keep the skin, render the fat cap down, get a crispy skin, turn it over. But like, if you think about it, where I grew up, South Louisiana, we're at the end of the migration. We're now transitioned from high carbohydrate diets in the north to highly vegetal diets of marsh grasses and invertebrates and proteins and stuff like that down in the marshes. And all that fat cap, it's all rendered down naturally. Like literally, you have, if we go shoot most blue-winged teal, most wood ducks, most gray ducks, gadwall to most people, and in the marsh, Louisiana, you're going to see a breast that just has skin on top, no fat at all. I mean, that duck has just leaned out through its migration and through its habit, through its diet, at least in my belief. Now, once you start getting west and you start seeing more, you getting that migration is more in the rice fields and such, like speckled-bellied geese have a great reputation for that in West Louisiana and Arkansas, is like, they're just eating high fat, high carb diets and kind of reserving all that fat. But we don't see that in the marsh ducks that we're shooting and where I hunt in South Louisiana. So, and that's how I grew up hunting. So maybe that was just one of those things like, well, you didn't eat them mid-rare because you had no fat and moisture to kind of lend to that meat. I don't know. So, or maybe they just didn't know any better,
Yeah, I think the other part that game care, specifically ducks in this case, ducks and geese. Do you have any practices that you believe in deeply? Like, let's go out to you're in the blind, you're at camp, and you have you're harvesting ducks. Do you do any field care?
Early season, if we hunting with dogs, I do. Now the problem is in South Louisiana. It's just such a shame. We have an alligator problem. And part of the reason why we have an alligator problem, because now we have alligator farms, and so we don't have anybody to hunt alligators.
Oh,
so
right.
So the population is not managed. So we don't hunt with dogs.
Okay.
Because we've all seen dogs getting bit by alligators, some killed. So every now and then, in fact, I say every now and then, every hunt, we lose one or two ducks to alligators.
Really?
At the pond. And that's throughout the season. That's throughout the season. But in, like, we're talking about teal season, September, they are highly active because the water and air temperature haven't dropped down below 70. And they start to become more docile after 70, more below 70.
Okay.
But when it's in September during teal season, like, you just don't put a dog in the water. So one issue, if you're hunting with a dog and you're hunting early teal and you have some, especially when you're in the early season in the South, I do like to I'll take a little Yeti hopper with me, fill it with ice, and all I'll do, if that dog retrieves it, I'll take my pocket knife and I'll slit open its breast right above the wishbone and just open up the cavity and just put it on ice just to get the internal temperature cool down faster. Because if I'm hunting with a dog in September in Louisiana, it's most likely 85, 90 degrees.
Gotcha.
That water temperature is 85 degrees. And if I'm hunting for 2 hours and those birds, we're just stacking up a 5 limit birds on the bow of a boat or on the rice field, like those birds aren't getting any better by sitting in 80-degree weather piled up on each other. So if I can alleviate some of that internal organ heat by just splitting open the skin above the wishbone and just letting some of that out and getting I know some people who'll pluck the breast right there and just leave them like that, because at least like that insulation that the feather is keeping in, just let it breathe. So it's a little more work, and you get caught in the moment, and teal season is fun and fast and shooting. But if you can, it will make that bird better to eat if you can just alleviate some of that heat that's coming off them, especially and again, I'm being very specific to warm weather, early season climates.
Okay, that's actually really interesting. It's what do you think happens when you don't help it cool off?
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things like in the lower intestines and the liver. I mean, as much as a liver and heart taste good, they have a lot of kind of visceral blood around them, especially like if a good shot, like BBs don't just go through the bird and that's what kills it. It's the shock, the static shock of the bird, and actually gets them like hemorrhaging, right? Internally hemorrhaging. So you have this pool of blood inside that cavity that, if sitting at 85 degrees, it's just like kind of marinating with the liver and the heart and the innards. Yeah, and it's just not making anything. Will it spoil the bird? No. But if you have the ability to treat it better, that's kind of like what I said on stage. I was like, look, like I can put these onions in the recipe and just like go on to my next step, and it would still work.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way I'm making this better is if I treat this onion as a specific thing, and I don't just treat it as an afterthought. I'm like cooking them down. I'm getting a little caramelization. I'm adding some little pinches here and there to like accentuate and bring out those onions. The same way with this bird. If I had a chance to make it better, I'm going to make it better.
Yeah.
Like you can get by not, and probably maybe nobody would know the difference. But once you start making it better, you likely won't go back, because you've kind of seen, oh wait, like this is actually adding to the overall benefit of the dinner table. And to me, that is like, I duck hunt because I like to hang out with my friends, but there's no way that I'm going duck hunting or any type of hunting and saying, oh no, y'all take that. I mean, maybe if I'm being nice, but like really, I'm hunting to fill a freezer. Like that's why I don't care if it's a doe or I don't hunt trophy bucks and I don't hunt trophy ducks. Like I want the meat.
You're looking for protein.
I'm looking for protein. So, anyways, if I'm going to be that specific, especially if I'm talking about feeding my wife, my 2.5-year-old, my pregnant wife for that, like I want her to be eating the best of the best. And that's why, like, if I don't pull out my freezer, whether it's a redfish, a speckled trout, red snapper, ducks, geese, deer, hogs, squirrels, I have it all in my freezer right now. But if like sometimes I'm like, man, I wouldn't mind just a smoked chicken. You know what I mean? Like,
but you know where to get a good one. I
know where to get a good one. Yeah. And that's important. Right? I think that's why we see a resurgence in the farmers markets throughout the country, in all kind of cities, small towns, and big cities. Is like the farmers markets are becoming more popular because people want to know where their food's coming from, and that doesn't matter if it's a turnip or a duck or a farm raised duck. Like people want to know. We have that ability and that privilege as Americans to go out and hunt and harvest our own food. Like I was in Vietnam not too long ago, and I was there for 5 weeks, and there's no private ownership of guns. So, and they have some of the most wonderful duck habitats in the country, but They can't hunt. They can trap. They use nets to trap ducks. But anyways, and I was showing them pictures of me with my gun on my shoulder, kneeling down with like a pile of birds or a hog, and I'm holding up a deer, and they're just like mesmerized by it. We have the privilege of going out in our country, whether it's private or public land, and harvesting our own food. Not everybody now we have that option, but not everybody takes advantage of it. And that's why I feel like the farmers markets are another, like it's just, one degree of separation for some folks to say, well, I'm not going to go out and kill this animal, but I still want to know who did.
That's crazy. So was that I think I'm being silly. Was that a duck camp dinner episode in Vietnam?
I wish, but you just cannot own. You can't shoot. Like there's no guns. There's no. So that was all for fun. we had 2 trips to Vietnam canceled because of COVID.
Oh.
One was canceled when everything shut down, and then we scheduled one a year later. And I was like, certainly this will be done in a year. That one was canceled. We couldn't get into the country, and now we have a 2.5-year-old. My wife's 8 months pregnant, and so we went when she was about 4 months pregnant, and we're like, let's just get it out of our system. So we went for 5 weeks, and we went throughout the whole country with our 2-year-old, who just started. It was awesome, and I would do it again, but I wouldn't do it again either.
Really? Yeah.
But I would just do it again. You got to deal with time change.
Yeah.
Vietnam is an extremely friendly place, but it's not very welcoming to families.
Gotcha.
They're not mean. It's just like it's wild. It's like the Mexico of Southeast Asia, but without the murders.
Without the cartel.
Without the cartel.
Yeah.
I know that's a bad comparison to draw, because the people are incredible. The food is amazing. The history is amazing. It's just like there's motorcycles everywhere and scooters everywhere, and it's hard to get a stroller, past.
Oh,
everyone.
that's what
it's just like, it's just not really conducive to like, let's take a family trip with our 2.5-year-old and pregnant wife.
Do you need a booster? It's a booster.
No such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No such thing. Eat with your hands, because you're not using chopsticks. Yeah. I mean, I can use chopsticks, but like the little boy, he's just eating with his hands anyway.
So that if you can go there and eat whichever way you want.
Right? Yeah, and talk about it's a wild place, but like there's no factory commodity farms in Vietnam. Like there's family farms that come sell their stuff on the side of the street with no refrigerator. Like you're buying animals they raise and slaughtered that day at a market, and what they don't sell, they eat, and that's what life is.
That is, I bet you, given the nature of our conversation today, I bet you just thrived in that environment.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I have a very, very keen sense of smell, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Though, and that's one of those places that'll really test your. It's just wild. It's just new smells, and I'm not like, oh man, these people are uncivilized, right? It's just new to me, because in America we just don't shop or go about our daily lives like that. They do, and they're perfectly happy, fine, and healthy. Probably even much healthier for sure.
Yeah.
Than most Americans.
No.
But they live a different life,
Mm.
and I think perspective, just like when talking about wild game or farm, perspective is key when it comes to these types of things, and it's important to me to continue building that throughout the world, which is part of the reason why I don't consider myself a wild game chef. Is because there's so much good in this world, like. Even if I'm eating 75% in the game that I eat, like I just know there's so much more out there that is not like us or not like my own thing, that is to be appreciated and admired.
That's awesome. So truth statement, game care can affect the taste and the outcome. What are some of the? Okay, now let's go. It's a little bit colder. So what are some of your principles for? That field to table, component of you harvest a duck. What are some of your basic care principles that you think are going to lead to a better taste outcome?
Well, if we're talking about ducks and geese specifically, keep that bird as whole as possible.
Really? Do you freeze it whole?
Yeah, if I can. Yeah. I
Really?
mean, what I like to do is I like to take the backbone out and freeze in halves.
Okay.
And what I'll do, like, I'm a little OCD, so even if I have the leg bones that are, I have that exposed bone, I'll, take some paper towel, some wet paper towel, wrap it around that exposed bone so it makes a perfect seal when I'm vacuum packing. So I always flat pack half ducks is what I like to do. But if I can, I'm gonna pluck the whole duck, or get a plucker or hire somebody to pluck the whole duck, because one, I believe that I can create more meals with whole ducks than I can with just plucked breast or so on. And right, I mean, even if I'm taking 15 ducks and put them in a pot and putting water over the top and a bunch of onion, celery, carrot,
Mhm.
garlic, bay leaf, peppercorns, thyme, rosemary, and I'm simmering those ducks. They fall off the bone. What I like to do is I'll take all that meat, I'll cryovac them in 1 pound packs, and then I'll not cryovac, but I'll put in quart containers, some other containers, all the juice, all the liquid. So I'll have my duck stock and I have my duck meat, and now I can use that duck meat for tacos in different ways, right out the freezer and just like fry it up in duck fat or bacon fat or something like that. And I can make soups or with my stock, or just use that for other like different gumbos or jambalayas throughout the year. So I get more meals out of that whole duck that I'm cooking in that way than I believe, like just like saving the breast alone. And now, obviously, if you want to just use the breast for mid-rare medium, then awesome. I love that too. But make sure you save that backbone and the legs to do something with, because that's 2 or 3 more meals in my opinion. You know,
I'd say that's a lost art is maybe what I want to say. I feel like when I was a kid, everything was whole duck,
Mhm.
and then now I feel like maybe I don't know. I'm saying this for the first time. Maybe the last 15 years, it's breast only, breasted out. Legs. There's not much good there, but I do feel like I feel like there's a lot of good meat there that a lot of people don't take
Yeah.
advantage of.
It's the path of least resistance, just taking the breast out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call it lazy, but what I will say is that like duck hunting's getting more expensive.
Mhm.
It's getting harder to find a place with a good, consistent, good duck populations that you can depend on, and it just makes a lot more sense to me to use the whole bird for those just simple reasons.
Mhm.
Like, we devote so much of our time and our resources into chasing these birds. It's by taking its life, you owe it to yourself,
Yeah.
to that bird, and to your family to get as much as you can from it.
I completely agree.
I just don't understand any other reasoning aside from, hate to say it, like laziness.
Mhm.
Or just like, I don't know, maybe you're just blessed with having like the greatest place that's always consistent. You can just keep the breast, and the people that work for you take the legs. I know some folks like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your thing. That ain't me though, and like, I'm not knocking anybody, like, but to me, I've taken a life. I'm now going to use that life to feed myself and the people that I love. I'm going to make sure that I get as much out of it as I can. Period.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Freezing.
Yeah.
You got any tips there?
Yeah. So another reason why I like to freeze half ducks, backbone out, and I'll save backbones for stocks. Like, so I'll just keep a Ziploc bag in the freezer and just keep putting backbones in it,
Mhm.
and I'll use that for whatever stock. But bones insulate and protect from freezer burn and so on. So like keeping that breastplate, those ribs, legs intact, like it keeps that meat with more integrity through the process, because freezing is harsh on proteins. I mean, we're mostly made of water.
Mhm.
When water freezes, it expands. It disrupts the integrity of the proteins within that meat. And that's what leads to purge and moisture and loss and moisture retention. Well, the lack of moisture retention when you thaw out a bird. That's why when you thaw out a bag of birds, it's a bunch of liquid in there. It's because you've disrupted the proteins. You've destroyed them by freezing, because it's mostly water. And now it can't hold on to that water. So now when it thaws, it's all in the bag.
Mhm.
And that's just what happens.
Right.
So if by leaving in bones and so on, and then like I like to cryovac, right? Because I want no air hitting the surface of meat. So I want skin on, I want bones on. So that skin's a protective layer for the meat. The bones on that underside and that carcass is a protective layer on the other side. Plus, and then I have the added advantage of cryovacing and reducing that air even more.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Another great thing, by the way, if we don't live in the climate in South Louisiana to do this, and if you have a big reach-in fridge to do this, or God bless you, a walk-in refrigerator to do this with, hang your ducks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Hang them by the neck without being plucked, with the guts and everything still in them. Hang them by the neck for a week, and then clean them after a week.
Hmm.
That was in the old, like, there's a reason why the French still do that. I mean, every culture aside America still does that, actually. We're the ones in the minority here. Every culture in America does this with ducks. And the best duck you have is aged, but the best way to do that, and the reason why, is like you don't want to expose that duck to the outside bacteria and air and mold that's in everything. So you leave it completely whole. Hang it by the neck. In fact, the French used to say to hang it by the neck till like you tie it around tight around the neck, and you hang it until the carcass falls off.
Jeez.
To where it like rots off the neck.
I've heard that too, but boy, that's a lot of
That's commitment.
In today's world of antibacterial wipes and this and that.
But like nature, it's like, right, we refrigerate eggs because we were told that you have to wash them.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody else refrigerates eggs in the world. Eggs are a shelf-stable commodity. Naturally, they are eggs from a farmer that you go in the farmer's market, and this just sitting out on the table, and they say you don't need to refrigerate these because they haven't been washed, right? So eggs come with a natural film antibacterial thing that keeps them shelf stable. That's why when you go to any country in Europe, they're on a dry aisle, not refrigerated, because our government has told us that we have to wash eggs because of sanitation reasons. But that's why we have to put them in the fridge, because we've rinsed off the natural antibacterial film that naturally comes with them. Naturally, that duck's going to get better with age. Every meat that we eat in the supermarket comes at least 60 days aged. Every piece. There's nothing that we eat from the grocery store that doesn't come with at least a month age on it. And so another big issue why people don't like wild games, because we don't age them typically, right? Not even like 24 hours in the fridge. You take a speckled belly goose, you take the breast off, you keep the fat cap on, and you put it in the fridge on a sheet tray with a rack, right? So you got a sheet tray, a cookie tray, a cooling rack, and then those breasts. You just let them. You go in the fridge with that and let the air just kind of circulate around them, dry them out. Let them go for 3 days, 4 days like that, and then cook them. Completely different.
Wow.
Completely different.
That's a lost art. It is, I think.
Yeah. Well, and some of it's resources. Like, I mean, who's got a place to hang 30 ducks?
True.
You know? And if you're in South Louisiana, you're definitely not hanging them in 75-degree weather. No, you need to be sub 60.
Yeah.
You know? And to hang them, or you need to have a walk-in refrigerator or freezer or refrigerator and do that like that. So, it's not for everyone, and you can't always do it. And you'd rather have the meat to eat than like be so bougie about it, pun intended, because of my last name.
Yeah.
But it will definitely, I mean, look, the history books will tell us this, and the great food cultures around the world. Look, America has a great food culture. It really does. And there's a lot of things to love about America for sure. Number one country, big fan. But we lack in our understanding of true cuisine. Yeah. We really do. Compared to the old worlds of anywhere in Europe, and you can go anywhere in Europe and you'll learn a lot about food, and you'll come back here and be like, what the hell are we doing? But a lot of it's due to regulations and things put upon us and then once those regulations happen, we get out of this flow, this historical flow we've been in for centuries and centuries and centuries, because we've told we have to do something like this, and then it just becomes part of the cultural norm, right? Like, it's just, you go on there's 1,000 examples of that.
Yeah, I think we could go on, because I'm really intrigued by that. Absolutely. But I don't want to wrap up this episode without introducing the listener to your season 3 that's upcoming. Duck Camp Dinner season 3. Tell us, when's it coming? How do they find it? Yeah. You want to tease anything out there? Go ahead.
Duck Camp Dinner season 3, all shot in Louisiana again. It'll be 7 episodes. All episodes will be around 45 minutes each, so take up an hour block this time. You'll find them on Waypoint TV, which you can get off of Roku, Samsung, LG, Apple, so on and so forth. You can download that app, right now and watch season 1 and 2. You can also go on Split Reed's YouTube channel, which is the production company that I've chosen to work with on these last 3 seasons, who've been great. A big shout out to Daniel Bagby, who's the camera, sound guy, and editor, and really the brainchild when it comes to throwing all this crazy stuff together, because it's a lot of terabytes of footage. Nobody really does it like us because it's harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the challenge, and I think that's why we get this like really different show than others. And you can find that come August. We haven't set a hard date, but call it middle of August right now, for season 3, episode 1. And we start off with teal season and an alligator hunt in September. And we end back at the floating camp in southern Terrebonne Parish, which the first season was kind of based around. Our friend camp, who's the owner, is actually in the booth working with me, Jay Scheck-Snyder, who owns the camp, with Ryan Blakely. And we end there, and we hunt all through Louisiana, 6 different kind of regions of Louisiana in those 7 episodes, and we try to cover all pursuits, man. There's some squirrel hunting, there's some deer hunting, there's certainly a lot of duck hunting. Some of it's really good, some of it's not so great. Louisiana had a really tough year last year because of this drought, a record drought. We were like, I don't know, something like 40-something inches below the average at a time. I mean, spillways were dried up, rivers were never, there's generations of Louisianans that have said they've never seen like just water at a lack like this. In fact, there was marsh fires and wildfires throughout Louisiana last year. Like, Louisiana doesn't have a water problem typically. Like, it has too much water. And last year was really tough, and it affected a lot of places that didn't have natural estuaries like where we hunt in southern Terrebonne Parish and all that, kind of where that brackish water marsh meets, because we get it straight from the intercoastal in the Gulf of Mexico, and that kind of mixes more with the freshwater swamps and so on. So we didn't have so much of a water issue, not like some of the folks kind of like around the Red River did, or in North Louisiana, Central Louisiana, certainly out of West Louisiana, where they're dependent on like pumping wells to flood rice, or from different bayous, and those bayous were just dry, like everything. So we face some of those things, which is also the truth around hunting in general, and some that we try to highlight is on Duck Camp Dinners on every episode. It's just like environmental issues, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, this is not like it. It is a very positive show, but there's challenges in every environment and habitat, no matter where you live, and ours usually has something to do with loss of land, saltwater intrusion, nutria-rats, apple snails, invasive species.
I'm thinking about this kind of maybe for the first time. 45 minutes gives you the time to actually have a deep dive into explore more conversations, right?
Absolutely. We were because we had to make the show within a 30 or hour long block. And at first we were like 30 minute shows, but what that really means is 22 minutes. And you're like, man, we just can't really tell the type of story that we want to tell in 22 minutes. Let's use all the footage that we have and make it 44 minutes. And everybody was really excited about that, because the only thing harder than editing a 44-minute show is trying to decide what should be in a 22-minute show.
That sounds hard. Yeah, I mean, you're cutting hard, right? Some good stuff, right?
And then once that gets into the black hole of a folder, the stuff you cut, it's hard to come back and be like, where's that going to go now?
Yeah, you're not going to, probably not going to use it.
Not going to use it. So we decided to use it all, make it 44 minutes, and let's see what happens. I believe that people want to sink their teeth in. We call it going deep, not wide.
Yeah.
So that's why we stayed in Louisiana for these past 3 seasons, because we really wanted to continue to dive deep into the food, the music, and the hunting culture of South Louisiana, or Louisiana specifically.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So what was that channel again?
Waypoint TV. Season 1 and 2 currently on Waypoint TV. Season 3 out in August on Waypoint TV. And also the Split Reed YouTube channel. As you can find it on season 1 and 2 now, and then season 3 coming in August.
Good, thanks. Yeah, I just want to make sure I hadn't that Waypoint TV. I'm not sure if I've heard of that before.
Yeah, it's it's one of like like Outdoor TV and Pursuit and so on. It's one of their competitors, but it's in just the pure space of streaming and subscription. So you have to download the Waypoint app on your smart TVs to get all their footage.
Yeah. Well, I'm not suggesting that no one else has heard of it. I'm just saying I don't get out much.
It's it's what it is. I mean, let's call it spade a spade. It's a relatively new platform, right? And it's trying to approach outdoor enthusiasts and TV in a different way, and so on. So it has, they have their own app. You can watch all the episodes on your phone on the app, or you can download the app on your smart TV and watch all the episodes there.
Yeah, I stream more TV on my phone than I do on a TV.
You're not. I mean, a lot of people are trending that way.
Yeah, if I'm at home, I guess.
I mean, they're getting better, right? Like, look at this thing. Like, I mean, I'm on the plane most time. I'm making sure I download all my Netflix shows before I go on the plane. I'm not even watching the screen of the movies in front of me. I have all my shows downloaded that I can watch offline on the plane when I fly. I mean,
me too. I could tell you what I downloaded, but that's not the point. But I do the same thing. No, this is great. Thank you so much. One, thank you for being here, being at the expo, and being available to those walking the show floor and sharing your time. Time is the most valuable asset that we can give anybody, and you gave me an hour. I really, really appreciate it.
And I would say to anybody listening here, I know you can't make it to Baton Rouge right now because obviously by the time you hear this podcast, it would be come and gone. But if Oklahoma City is the spot to be next year, I urge you, mark the time in your calendars. It's going to be at the same weekend.
Yep, same time. Yep,
same time, same weekend next year at Oklahoma City. I don't get to spend enough time in Oklahoma City, so I'm excited for that. But really, if you're listening to this right now and you haven't been to the Delta Waterfowl Expo, I urge you to. If you're a waterfowl hunter or just an outdoor enthusiast in general, it is one of the marquee events, and it's only in its third year right now, and I can only imagine it's going to be getting better. So congratulations to y'all. It's one of my most favorite times of the year. I can't wait to continue on.
Thank you.
Being an attendee, a speaker on stage, and hopefully, having this great relationship with y'all.
Yeah, I mean, we should continue this tradition. There's also a video that you helped us with, and our Delta's chapter system it's a crown jewel. The hunter, right? Like we call ourselves the Duck Hunters Organization, but we created a structure where chapters can raise money for Delta, but more importantly, they can do work in their local communities. So you have friendships and relationships with Delta folks who are chapter folks. And so you came up with this collaborative wood duck box project, which is an awesome idea, by the way. You offered up your time, you offered up some footage, and we put together a video that, one, promotes Louisiana and the conservation efforts that you believe in, that our chapters believe in, but then also makes just aware that I think there's so much of people that fund conservation. It's buy a membership. Yes, that's really important. Buy a hunting license. Of course, you have to do that. That's mandatory. Contribution to conservation. But that whole chapter, passion, volunteerism, make an impact locally. You're helping us shine a light on that. So thank you. Oh. We'll put that out there too. But you do a Jean-Paul. I'm going to do it again. Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. You nailed it. First time.
Yeah. So search for that. We'll be putting that out on social media channels as well. So you can.
Yeah. You can find me at Chef Jean_Paul on Instagram. I'll be promoting a lot of season 3 on there. You can get some recipes and tips and tricks and so on as well. So if you're not following, follow Chef Jean_Paul on Instagram. And and always I try to answer as many direct messages as I can. If you got some recipe questions, hunting questions, or so on and so forth, I really try to answer those. So hit me up. And, I've been blessed with this understanding of food and culinary. And obviously that took a lot of years and concentration and effort, but I really feel like being from Louisiana, I'm naturally born into this place. So I feel blessed for that. And I love sharing it more than anything, whether that's through cooking for people or just talking about it. It's really a passion of mine. So happy to help any way I can, if that's possible for folks listening.
I'll tell you what, you can probably hear the energy. I can see it. So I'm going to testify on your behalf. So appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time. Let's continue this relationship, continue the conversation. Just hit the pause button for now.
Cool. Appreciate you, man.
Right on,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you.